we can convert an operator like this into a multiplication, into a mathematical expression. So this can be a multiplication symbol. So the AND is understood as a multiplier. Right. So that's the AND version in Matlab, the ampersand. On the other hand, sometimes we don't require that all conditions be met. In some instances, we want to know, is either one of these have either one of these been met? So, for instance, if our course Z required that we pass either one of those two, then the operation is no longer an AND, it's an OR. So has course X or course Y been passed? Right? In that case, this OR operator is what we'd use instead. And here, looking at this example, let's say we have two courses C and D, and those courses are effectively the same material. So we want to know, has any student passed either one of these two courses? And if he or she has passed either one of those courses, then the outcome for that is a true. So is the mark for course C more than or equal to 50, or is the equivalent mark for course D more than or equal to 50? And the result of that is stored here. So let's look at some code for that. And before we do that, just to note here that in Matlab the symbol for OR is this vertical line here. So in the same way that AND used the ampersand, in the OR operator, we have to use this vertical stroke here. So you'll find that on the keyboard above the backslash, on the backslash key. So that's just a vertical line there. So let's just run that in Matlab. So here we can ask the question, right? We can see here that X and Y are 40. Let's just clear the screen. So X and Y are 40. And then let's do this check. So we'll change that to an OR. So is X greater than or equal to 50, or is Y greater than or equal to 50? And the result of that is 0. Neither one of them is greater than 50. Let's just switch this. Let's make the Y 60 here. And then we can see X is still not greater than 50, whereas Y is now greater than 50. So that's a true over here and a false there. So it's the result of true or false is true. So this is true. Yes, one of those two is greater than 50. So that's that case. Let's change it now. Let's let Y be 40 and let's let X be 60. And so when we check here, X is now more than 60, so this is true. And then this here is no longer true. Y is now less than 50, so that's a false here. So that's true or false, and in this case one of those has been met, so the result of that is true. And then if we made X and Y more than 50, then both those statements are true. We only required one to be true, but now both are true. That's just as good. And so the result of that is true. So that's the influence of the OR operator. The OR is effectively plus, and we can see that if we add these operations here, if they're both here I should be pointing here, if they're both false, if they're both 0, then 0 plus 0, that's a 0. And then if one of these is 1 and the other one is 0, then 1 plus 0 is the 1, so we get a 1 here. If we have 1 and 1 here, if that's a 1 and that's a 1, then 1 or 1 plus 1, that should be 2, of course, but because this is a different type of algebra, right? This is the algebra of truth and falsehood, of 0 and 1, of Boolean numbers. So this is a logic statement. So in this case, 1 plus 1 is actually 1. So that's the outcome of them both being true. So these are comparators. That's your fundamental building block in creating logic. and the or and operators are how you connect those together, and you can create some extremely sophisticated logic questions using that kind of representation. So now let's use those logic statements to execute some kind of outcome. In other words, let's use that logic to help us decide whether or not to take some particular action. So in the example above, we said that course A was a prerequisite to course B, and only if you've passed that course should you be allowed to register for that course. So that's the purpose of these if-then statements. So the syntax for that reads as, if something is true, then do something. So that's the syntax in Matlab. So we say here if the condition, and so we provide our comparison and the operators on the comparison, like we talked about earlier. So if that condition is met, then execute all the statements that lie in between this if statement and the end here. So we have to use this end to signify that we've reached the end of all the statements we want to execute if this condition is true, right? And you'll see here that we normally indent all of these statements. So let's look here. Let's write that out in a program. So switching over to Matlab, let's clear that screen and call up the editor. And let's initialize our program, close all, clear all, CLC, and let's say that the mark for course A was 40, and let's ask the question, or let's try and take action on that. So we say if mark A is more than or equal to 50, then register for course B, and let's say we signify a registration allowance if we say reg B equals 1. So let's start here saying reg B equals 0. In other words, to begin with, we aren't allowed to register for course B, and then when the mark for course A is checked, then we may register for B. So let's say end here. So that's the if-then syntax in Matlab. So if condition, then execute the statements until we reach the end of that block. So you can see here that the editor has inserted the space. That's to indent our work so that we can read that code more easily. So any text that's been indented there, we understand as being part of the code that will only be executed if that statement is true. So we could insert here other functions. We could, for instance, issue the command, if it existed, to welcome that student. So if such a thing existed, then we could add that here. So there needn't be just one outcome from that condition being true. We can have as many statements being executed in here as we like, and we just use this end here to signify that we are at the end of those statements. So let's take that off and let's just run this as it is, or let's add here that the outcome should be printed on the screen. So let's save this one, and I'm in the root folder. Let's switch over to the folder. Right, we said before we want to work in this folder here, so let's just switch into that folder. So here let's save that. So sims, let's call that ex003, and in Matlab we are also in the wrong folder. We haven't saved the file that we've saved it here, so let's switch over there. So let's say change directory to that folder name. So we're in the right place now in Matlab, and we can run ex03, and you see reg B is 0 still, and that's because the student has not passed course A, which is a prerequisite for B, so he can't register for that course. Let's change that mark to 60, and let's see. So now you can indeed register for course B. So that's your